Chapter 72. The food had arrived. Javon was ravaged and tore into his breakfast, while Tony merely moved the food around on his plate with the fork. "What makes you think I'm their next target?" Tony asked. The message was pretty straightforward. Your friend was the warning, which, if ignored, would result in consequences leading to death. You're leading the charge against the corporation. Thus, you're the most reasonable target for any escalation. So, if this is coming from within GenaSeed, do you have any idea who might be behind it? This is completely confidential, understood? Of course. I'm pretty sure the person behind all this is Roger Cortez. Why him? He was the only person from GenaSeed at your conference, correct? As far as I know. He would have seen Steven Schroeder with you at the conference. Therefore, he became aware of someone besides you who could become the warning target. But how would he have known where Steven lives? You don't think with all their money they don't have private investigators on staff? I'd never considered that. I guess it's not much of a stretch to think they do. Cortez wouldn't have been the one to assault your friend, but I'm convinced he's the one who hired the person who did. What proof do you have? Nothing yet. That's why I wanted to speak with you in person. I have a plan that might draw him out. Let's finish our meal first, and then we can go somewhere more private, where I can give you the details, he said. Tony looked at the food on his plate and said, "I'm done eating whenever you're ready." It took Bravo 12 minutes to reach the Best Inn Hotel. He took the elevator to the 5th floor and found room 516. He listened at the door for a couple of minutes, but heard no sound from within. Believing it was safe to enter, he reached into his pocket and took out the passkey to the room. Sliding it into the slot on the door, the light at the top turned green. He turned the handle and opened the door. Stepping into the room, he closed the door behind him. Once in the room, he removed the gloves from his pockets and put them on. Examining the room, he could see the remnants of Remington's stay there. While the room had been cleaned, clothing was lying across 2 of the chairs, and an assortment of opened snacks sat on the dresser. He checked the pockets of the clothing strewn across the chairs, but nothing was in them. Bravo moved to the closet and looked inside. 2 suits with dress shirts and ties were hanging on the rack. A pair of brown dress shoes were on the floor. A suitcase was sitting in the corner of the closet. He took it out and laid it on the bed. Fortunately, it was unlocked. Looking inside, he checked the pockets and the different sections, but nothing was there to be found. He opened the dresser drawers and scanned each for anything that would identify who Remington was. There were socks, underwear, T-shirts, and a couple of pairs of jeans. Bravo looked under the bed and on the bedside table, but there was nothing. Then he realized he'd seen a hotel safe in the closet. Returning there, he tried opening the door, but it was locked. If any identification was to be found in the room, he thought it would undoubtedly be there. He pulled the burner phone out of his pocket and looked to see if anything on it might indicate a passcode for the safe. He scanned the contacts, which were few, and briefly looked at the last few texts, then opened the notes. There was nothing. On a whim, he entered the phone number of the burner phone and was pleasantly surprised when the safe beeped and unlocked. Inside the safe, he found 4 passports with different names, but the same picture of Remington. Additionally, he saw 4 driver's licenses bearing identical photos, but depicting distinct identities. The remaining items were 4 credit cards, matching the names on the 4 driver's licenses, and a roll of cash. He took the passports, driver's licenses, credit cards, and the cash roll, closed the safe, and locked it using the same passcode he'd used. He looked at the suits and dress shirts. Then, taking off his shoes, he tried on the dress shoes, testing the fit. Since he and Remington were essentially the same build, he decided to change clothing and selected the tan-colored suit. He chose a light blue checkered shirt and put on the navy tie. Slipping the dress shoes back on, He looked in the mirror and was pleased the items fit so well. He found a plastic laundry bag in the hall closet and placed his clothes and shoes in it. Looking around the room, he checked to be sure he hadn't missed anything. Satisfied he had everything that should be taken, he opened the door to the hallway, removed the gloves, and placed them in the plastic bag. Then, letting the door close behind him, he reached into the plastic bag and wiped off the door handle with the shirt before heading to the elevator. Examining himself in the mirror beside the elevator, he smiled at the image that looked like a business executive out for a stroll. Javon and Tony drove from the restaurant to Waterloo Park, which took about 12 minutes. The city park spanned 11 acres and featured walking trails, food trailers, native plants, and a 5,000-person amphitheater that hosted concerts and events. Tony parked the car, and the men got out and started down one of the trails. When Javon was convinced they were out of anyone's hearing, he began to share his plan. Let's assume Cortez wanted you out of the way. He has 2 methods to achieve this. He could have you killed, as the message left at Steven Schroeder's apartment indicates, or he could arrange a situation where you could be seen as the prime suspect in the abduction of Walter Jenkins. The first option doesn't harm your reputation and may even increase trouble for GenaSeed if you become a martyr to those sympathetic to your cause. I believe the message left at the FBI office was intended to eventually point us in your direction. The message left in the apartment allegedly was supposed to be your failed attempt to throw us off by suggesting you were being threatened. That said, your life is in danger because if Plan A fails, then Cortez will fall back to Plan B and try to kill you. But if all the evidence points to me, why do you feel I'm innocent and Cortez is not? 2 reasons. The envelope left at the FBI was one of 3 that Sandra Brown, GenaSeed's VP of Communications, had inadvertently brought to my office the day of the media conference. She told me she'd picked them up off the floor outside her office as she left to attend that meeting. I believe Cortez purposely left them on the floor outside her office, knowing she was rushing to get to the conference and would probably pick them up and take them with her. Since the executive floor is highly secure and only escorted individuals can access that floor, those envelopes had to have been left by someone having access to that floor. Yes, I've experienced that security myself, but why wouldn't Cortez just have brought them himself? According to what I've been told, he was there for moral support. Sandra Brown and Daniel Bruner were attending officially with their roles in the company. Cortez had no official reason for being there, so he had no idea if he'd be permitted to attend. So Sandra Brown was used as the pack mule to get them in the building, but how did it get left? When Sandra was in my office, 2 of the envelopes accidentally fell out of her portfolio. While she was in the ladies' room, I'm fairly certain that Cortez carefully removed one of the 3 envelopes from her portfolio, making sure not to leave any fingerprints on it. In addition, Cortez lied when he told me the only employee of Environ Life he was aware of was you. He said he saw Steven at the conference, but didn't know who he was as he wasn't introduced to him. Well, he is correct. I didn't introduce Steve to him. Most conferences I've attended required all participants to wear name tags. Were you both wearing name tags at the conference? Yes, we were. But that still doesn't prove he knew Steven's name, does it? Tony asked. If he hadn't known his name, how would he have known Steven was the person to be targeted for the assault? Javon asked. That's a good point, Tony acknowledged. Second, I've been doing this job for so long that I can read people well. In my initial meeting with Cortez, I felt I was dealing with someone putting up an impressive facade. The second time we spoke was when I interviewed him at the FBI office. When I mentioned we'd found an envelope in Steven's apartment containing the same message as the one at my office, I noticed a very brief look of shock on his face. I believe, when Cortez arranged for the assault on Steven, he'd instructed whoever he hired to relay the message to your friend, but physical evidence of the message wasn't to be left at the apartment. Why would that make any difference if it was left or just verbalized? Verbalized could be someone who coincidentally used the same words, However, a note indicates that the message was most likely dictated and written down to be relayed during the assault. Okay, I can see how that could be viewed. If everything you say is true, what's the next step, since you don't have solid evidence to arrest him? Tony asked. The next step is to arrest you for the abduction of Walter Jenkins.